My name is Marcus. I am a happy but unfortunately single father of 2 children. My daughter is 6 and my boy is 10 years old. Every Christmas, I want to offer them the joy of receiving presents from Santa. So, I pay an online service for someone to dress up in a Santa Claus costume and come to our home to entertain the children. Since my boy was 3 years old, I hired the same guy every Christmas. But last year, I couldn't find any availability on that business to book. So I went to an open source website to search for such a service, and I found one. I usually trust other people and never encountered a problem online. Different profiles were on that website selling all imaginable kinds of services like cleaning, birthday parties, entertainers, handymen, and so on. One particular profile grabbed my attention, showing 11 years of experience with children, ticking all the boxes for my specific requests. I messaged the guy, telling him what I needed from him, where he would find the presents, and how we could manage for him to surprise the children while I was staying with them, gathered around the Christmas tree. I told him that I could leave the kitchen window a bit open for him to come through and surprise us by exclaiming, "Santa Claus is here, no more waiting, kids," to increase the excitement of the children. He accepted the offer by saying just, "Sure, I can do it." But after a couple of days, he sent me a weird text asking me a lot of questions about my kids and to show him some photos with them. I wasn't that suspicious at that moment, and I answered some of his questions, which seemed innocent back then. The first was if the kids are okay with strangers and if they scream in case they see a person stepping into our house. I supposed it was related to the fact that he would come as Santa and wanted to know how to interact better with them, so I said that they wouldn't have a problem with him. The second question was if their mother or anyone else is living with us. I said no. There's just us, so for him to enter as planned into our home and be spotted by someone and ruin the surprise won't be a worry. The third one was actually creepy and raised some concerns about this person. He asked me if I could turn off the lights in the house until he gets to the living room and surprises us just for the atmosphere. Although I didn't agree at first, I accepted his idea because it can make everything more enjoyable with just the Christmas tree lights on. 2 days before Christmas Eve, I received a call from the guy that I hired all these years to be the Santa, apologizing because their website has some technical problems and the booking system is down, asking me if I need their services this year, like usual, and also offered me a discount. Of course, I was pleased to say yes, and let the other man know that I found from the internet that I won't need his service anymore. He didn't reply. I guess he didn't care too much to bother. The Christmas Eve arrived and the children and I were sitting on the couch in our living room waiting for Santa Claus to come and see the kids happy. Santa came, turned on the lights, and asked my boy what presents he wants, how the school is going. You know, small talk between Santa and kids. The chilling moment was when my daughter patted my knee and asked me when her Santa will come in. I told her that this Santa is the only one for all children, and she will have her presents in a moment. But she insisted that she saw another Santa outside, in our backyard. I said, "Okay, I should check, but I can't leave the children alone with the Santa guy." So I told him that we have a little gift for him as well, and walked the children into their room and closed the door with the key. I went in a hurry to see what my daughter saw in our garden, and damn, she was right. I saw somebody in a Santa Claus costume on the floor with blood coming from the head. I was shocked. I rushed into my kids' room, grabbed them, and went to our neighbors, assuring no one is following us. I called the police, told my neighbors what happened, and they were terrified as well. Unfortunately, when the police came to our house, the guy wasn't there anymore. They said he left just a few minutes ago. The saddest thing was that he killed the guy who I hired to be our Santa, an innocent, honest person who was truly kind and very good with kids. I can't imagine what could have happened to us if my daughter wouldn't have seen the other Santa in the garden. My name is Sam. I am 32 and I currently live in South London. I moved here with my parents at 15. First, I didn't like it because I missed my friends and the familiar places from home, but we had to move because my home country was terrible at that time and offered no possibilities for a better life. At 22, I moved into a shared house in Croydon. If you know that part of the city, you know is shocking dangerous. But I didn't have a huge budget for London, and with time, you can get used to it. You get to know what areas to avoid, especially after 10 p.m. But 1 year ago on Christmas Eve, after buying some stuff from a shop, I decided to skip the bus and hear home walking. The thing is that on my way home, from that store, I have to go through a dark part of the neighborhood, really infamous. The streets were empty, I was fine with the route and walked chill, enjoying the snow. From the eerie silence, I heard someone singing "Santa Claus is Coming to Town," just this line, but in a truly creepy way, not the original version of the song. The voice kept being closer to my ears and I turned my head back slowly, just to see where the person was standing and if there was anything wrong with me. I saw that was a tall man, not too young, not too old. I could tell only by his voice because his face was covered with a Santa mask and a hood on. I tried to walk faster and get home before it was too dark, but he was following the rhythm of my steps. That moment sent shivers down my spine and felt so unsafe. The street I walked by was not lit at all, darker than the others, and just a few houses with lights on. Usually on this period, people are gone on holidays. I turned to that creep and shouted to stop following me. What he did next was truly disturbing. The guy stopped singing, put his hand into his pocket, and got out a knife, pointing it towards me. I tried to keep my cool, my heart racing like a horse in a derby. My mind was spinning, urging me to run, but my feet were glued to the pavement. I couldn't risk making any sudden movements. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble," I stammered, my voice trembling. The masked figure stayed silent, his eyes fixated on mine, or at least, I think they were. It was hard to tell under that eerie Santa mask. I could hear the distant echo of my heartbeats. The situation was spiraling out of control faster than I could comprehend. Then, without warning, the man tilted his head, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. His stance relaxed, just a fraction. "You're not the one," he muttered, almost to himself. And then, in a sudden swift move, he pocketed the knife and turned away, disappearing into the darkness from whence he came. I stood there, frozen in place for what felt like an eternity. The adrenaline rush was fading, leaving a hollow feeling in its wake. Trembling, I fumbled for my phone and dialed 999, reporting the incident as quickly as my shaking hands would allow. The police arrived shortly after, taking my statement and conducting a search of the area. But there was no sign of the man in the Santa mask. That night, sleep eluded me. Every creak of the floorboards and every rustle of the wind outside made me jump. I kept replaying the encounter in my mind, trying to make sense of what had happened. Who was that man, and why did he stop his pursuit so abruptly? Days turned into weeks, and Christmas approached like a looming shadow. I avoided that dark street, taking longer routes to get home, always on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder. But then, just when I thought the ordeal was behind me, strange things started happening. I'd catch glimpses of someone watching me from a distance. Footsteps echoed behind me, even in broad daylight. Each time I turned, there was no one there. The feeling of being followed haunted me, a chilling presence that refused to be shaken off. It was as if the man in the Santa mask had left an indelible mark on my life, a sinister shadow that lingered even when there was no one there. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. And as Christmas Eve approached once more, a sense of dread settled in my chest, whispering that something darker was about to unfold. It was 2021, we know what a year was. I had a holiday booked for 2020, but of course it was amended for the next year, so there we are, Bali, 2021, with my husband and our 3 children. After so many hours of flying, we got to the booked villa. Everything was perfect, as expected, but we requested a Christmas tree, just to feel more of the Xmas atmosphere. We got the tree, but the host said not to turn on the lights at night, to not get the attention of people that are in the next villa because they are anti-Christians and we won't be safe otherwise. Me and my instantly felt cringe, but moved our heads like we agreed. But in the evening, we turned on the lights without taking care of the host, talking about the people next door. What happened next is terrible and terrifying. The Christmas lights twinkled, bathing the villa in a cozy glow. Our kids were thrilled, laughing and playing around the tree. But there was this weird feeling in the air like something was off. At night, as we sat together, whispers started seeping in through the window. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, sending a chill down our spines. We stepped out thinking it was just our imagination, and that's when we saw them. Shadows moved in the other villa, doing this strange, eerie dance. It felt like they were up to something sinister, and I couldn't shake off that feeling. The lights started acting up too, flickering in this weird pattern. It was almost like they were trying to tell us something. Then came the screams. Piercing, bone-chilling screams. We wanted to go help, but fear rooted us to the spot. Panic set in as we realized our phones had no signal. We clung to each other, praying for dawn to break the horrifying grip this night had on us. But deep down, we knew that what happened that night was just the start of something far more terrifying. The screams pierced the night, filling us with a chilling dread. My husband and I exchanged terrified glances, unsure of what to do next. The echoes faded, leaving an eerie silence that seemed to suffocate us. Desperate for a sign of safety, we tried to retreat into our villa, but the Christmas lights flickered erratically, as though they were trying to warn us. It was unnerving, like they were echoing the chaos unfolding next door. As we stood frozen, a sudden movement caught our attention. Figures emerged from the shadows, shrouded in darkness and moving with an unsettling rhythm. Their faces were obscured, and they continued their haunting performance, seemingly unaware of our presence. Fear clenched my heart as I realized their dance was a macabre symphony, a disturbing spectacle that felt more like a ritual than mere movement. My husband and I exchanged frantic whispers, debating whether to intervene or seek help. But before we could decide, the figures abruptly stopped their dance, turning as one to face our direction. Their eyes, glinting in the dim moonlight, locked onto us. It felt as though they could see through the veil of night, staring directly into our souls. The air grew heavier, charged with an otherworldly energy that sent shivers down my spine. A voice, cold and hollow, cut through the silence. "You've trespassed where you shouldn't have," it whispered, chilling me to the core. The figures began to advance, their movements synchronized in a haunting, deliberate manner. In a rush of terror, we stumbled backward, rushing into the villa and bolting the door behind us. We huddled together, the children awakened by the commotion, their innocent eyes wide with fear. As the night pressed on, the air thickened with an oppressive aura. Whispers brushed against the windows, the chilling sound of something unknown trying to breach the safety of our refuge. We spent the remainder of that night huddled together, praying for the first light of dawn to break the grip of terror that had consumed us. But the fear lingered, an ominous presence that foretold of darker horrors yet to unfold.
For 1 year of our wedding, my wife and I decided to escape the city and rent an Airbnb woods cabin for the weekend. Everything seemed perfect. The weather, the remote and peaceful location, the cozy little cabin nestled among the trees. It was just what we needed to decompress from our hectic lives and reconnect with each other. When we arrived, an elderly couple who owned a nearby home greeted us enthusiastically. They showed us around the cabin, pointing out where extra towels and firewood were kept, and let us know to pop by if we needed absolutely anything. I smiled politely, already dreaming of when we'd finally have total privacy. We unpacked, and I could feel the stress melting away with every breath of fresh forest air. But scarcely an hour later, a sharp rap at the door interrupted us. I opened it to find our hosts letting themselves in, making themselves at home on the couch as they prattled on about keeping us company. Mortified, I tried hinting that we preferred to relax alone, but they just laughed as though I'd made a silly joke. The husband even had the audacity to ask me to fetch them drinks from our kitchen. As they made themselves further at home, turning on the TV and fireplace, my wife and I exchanged helpless looks. Our romantic weekend was being shattered before our eyes. Finally, I bluntly asked them to give us some space, but They waved off my increasing frustration. "But we must celebrate newlyweds properly," the wife trilled, as the husband added. "This will be such a fun evening for all of us." At my wit's end, I stepped out to call the cops while my wife kept anxiously eyeing their bizarre behavior inside. Thank goodness the authorities swiftly removed our deranged hosts, though they seemed utterly oblivious to wrongdoing. The sheriff later informed us that the duo were not actually the cabin owners. The real elderly couple had gone missing recently under dark circumstances, and a search of the couple's home revealed possible connections to other disappearances in these very woods over the years. We left that dreadful place shaken to the core. Our anniversary retreat had narrowly avoided becoming another tragic cold case thanks to those psychos knocking on our door. Now I triple-check all lodging reviews, unwilling to ever tempt fate again. I couldn't believe how close we'd come to who knows what kind of danger. Every little detail seemed amplified now in my memory. The way the fake hosts had casually settled in, making themselves comfortable as if it were their own home. The eerie insistence on celebrating our anniversary together, despite our clear discomfort. It sent shivers down my spine, thinking of what could have happened if we hadn't acted swiftly. As we packed up, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. The sheriff's words echoed in my mind about the other disappearances in those very woods. It made my skin crawl, thinking that we had almost become another dark statistic. Driving away, I glanced back at the cabin, a sense of relief washing over me that we were leaving that place behind. But a lingering fear lingered, a fear of what could have been if we hadn't been so assertive about getting help. That cabin, once a dreamy escape, now stood as a haunting reminder of how easily things could go terribly wrong. In September last year, I found myself in Las Vegas for a basketball tournament. Usually, I'd crash with teammates, but this time I was on my own, staying in an Airbnb near the Vegas Strip. Turns out, the neighborhood wasn't as great as I'd thought. The Airbnb host, Megan, was a puzzle. Her profile picture? A flower. She'd given me a key code for a studio attached to her house. Red flag. The code was 10987654. Yet, the Wi-Fi password was my password. I figured Megan wasn't too savvy with tech. Around 9:30 p.m., things took a bizarre turn. Tapping on my window, covered by drapes. I mumbled a confused, "huh." The tapping paused, then started again. Louder this time, I said, "Hello?" and it ceased. Worried, I messaged Megan, wondering if it was her. Her response came later, claiming she'd been bringing water but left, thinking I was asleep. I felt on edge, debating whether to step out or shower, but I stayed put. Then, around midnight, noises outside, followed by someone trying the key code. The door unlocked. Panic surged. I dashed and slammed the door on the intruder. They insisted it was their room, saying they were Megan. I called the cops, yelling for help. The police arrived, seemingly unfazed by my account. They stuck around until I got an Uber. Megan, defensive and changing stories, didn't offer an apology. Leaving, I couldn't shake off the fear. I never caught a glimpse of the person trying to enter. The timing felt planned, targeting my vulnerability after a late flight. The tapping at 9:30 p.m. struck me later and seemed like a test, checking if I was asleep. It all felt like a setup. It could have been just a break-in, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it could have escalated to something much worse. It was March 2022 when I booked a solo Airbnb stay in a remote part of Phoenix for an upcoming job interview. Scrambling to find lodging on a tight budget, I lucked into a tiny guest house rental way cheaper than any dreary hotel. Sure, it was situated off a winding dirt road in the desert outskirts, but the charming photos of colorful cacti and breathtaking red rock vistas won me over, and the 30-minute commute wasn't terrible. Arriving at the property, I took in the quirky artistic touches like a wave-shaped succulent garden and rusty metal owl sculptures adorning the walkway. Inside, The boho chic decor of wool blankets, clay pots brimming with sage bundles, and a framed topographic map reflected the whimsy of a free-spirited owner. I instantly felt warmth and creative inspiration I hoped would infuse my interview preparation. That first evening, I reviewed notes at the hand-carved wooden table, watching the room slowly darken to blackness outside. Just as I switched on a lamp, an abrupt tap at the window made me jump. Peering out at the vast, shadowy wilderness, I detected no signs of life. Likely just a curious coyote or heavy desert winds, I reasoned, turning back to my laptop. The interview went smoothly the next day as I dazzled the panel with everything I had absorbed in my cozy oasis. I spent the next 48 hours exploring the nooks and crannies of the vibrant downtown, fueling up at quirky cafes and admiring street art. I unwound for golden hour in the little house's backyard daybed, snapping photos of the breathtaking palette of magentas and violets streaking the sky. That night, relaxing inside, another startling tap shook me from my aimless browsing. Heart-pounding, I inspected every shadowed corner outside, yelling stern warnings into the void. Had someone been lurking unseen, observing me? The thought sent shivers skittering down my spine. Or perhaps the isolation was simply feeding my imagination. The next day, packing up to leave, I heard a faint scuffling under the creaky floorboards. Crouching slowly toward the closet, I yanked it open to reveal nothing but my own stuffed suitcase. Laughing anxiously at my riled-up nerves, I finished getting ready, contacted my skeptical host about strange noises, and left the whimsical guest house behind me. With its odd occurrences and eccentric personality, the desert dwelling would forever mystify, yet intrigue me in memory. Had my mind conjured phantom sounds in the barren solitude? I'll never know for sure, but I avoided peering out into the darkness on my lonely drive back downtown, just in case. My girlfriend Amanda and I took a trip to a remote cabin in the Smoky Mountains in the fall of 2022. I had found a cute little Airbnb listing for an off-grid cabin with tons of good reviews, so it seemed trustworthy enough. The cabin was a small, old-fashioned log cabin with no electricity way out in the woods down a long dirt road. The nearest neighbor was the owner, who lived about a mile away. We arrived around 3 p.m. and spent a nice evening cooking on the wood stove and playing Scrabble by oil lamp light. After hiking all day, we were exhausted. Amanda headed up to the loft to sleep while I stepped outside for some fresh air. About 15 minutes later, I heard a loud banging against the side of the cabin. Before I could react, Amanda called down, asking if that noise was me. I said no, it must have been a tree branch falling. We dismissed it, but then came another startling crack against the walls. I rushed inside as Amanda climbed down the ladder, looking freaked out. I tried to seem calm, but told her to grab our knives while I kept watch. We heard odd scraping outside, so I called out with no response. The noises got louder and more frequent over the next few hours. Thumping, scraping, rattling, clearly not any animal we knew of. At one point, we pulled up the loft ladder in case someone tried getting in. We huddled there in silence all night, terrified as the chaos continued outside. At dawn, we warily emerged to inspect the surroundings. Amanda's car seemed fine, and there were no signs of intrusion or damage. As we hurriedly left, I reported it all to the skeptical owner. He suggested maybe a bear, but the deliberate pacing and banging didn't fit. We still debate over what the true explanation could be. Perhaps a deranged mountain man was trying to scare us off his territory. All I know is we're lucky neither of us ended up murdered in that cabin from hell. December. What a lovely month. 2 years ago, my girlfriend Leah and I were so excited to finally take a weekend trip together to a cozy cabin in the Poconos we found on Airbnb. The pictures showed an adorable log cabin, all polished wood and stone fireplaces, tucked away in a peaceful pine forest next to a glistening lake. It seemed perfect for a romantic getaway. Secluded, scenic, and even a jacuzzi tub. Driving up the long winding path from the main road, though, I felt the first trickle of unease. The deeper we went into the remote woods with no cell service, the thicker the forest pressed in around us. The darkness pooled between knotted trees that arched ominously over the path gave me chills, despite the sunshine. When we pulled up to the charming cabin, Leah gushed over the details just like the photos, while I shrugged off my nerves. Lugging our bags inside, however, my skin prickled at the heavy silence permeating the place, so removed from civilization. Even flipping lights on, the shadows clung to corners like a lingering dampness. Despite it all, Leia and I were determined to make the most of our time alone together. We got the hot tub bubbling, made dinner in the cozy kitchen, and reminisced over wine by a crackling fire, cozied under a blanket. Until we heard the scraping. It started faintly, clawing noises trailing the outside walls. We peered through the windows, but couldn't make anything out in the dark tree cover. Then came heavy stomping footsteps on the porch, the door rattling violently in its frame. No matter how shrilly I demanded who was there, only ominous silence answered as we cowered together, the shivering firelight casting wild dancing shadows around us. We were completely isolated, with no neighbors for miles to hear our cries for help. The barrage continued relentlessly for hours, circling the cabin trying to get in as we hid trembling inside. Some demented psycho knew we were there, utterly alone and at their mercy. Even our attempts to sneak away were foiled when Leah's car alarm blared, giving our position away. By dawn, the assault had ceased, a trail of our tormentor eerily cold. We fled that place, shaken to the core, despite no signs of a break-in. Leah swears she spotted fleeting figures stalking us from between the dense trees our entire drive out. All I know for sure is we will never tempt fate by renting a secluded cabin again. I know, I am over 25 and still love gaming. What can I do? Yesterday night, the kind where a chill permeates the air, seeping into your bones. My buddies and I were huddled in my basement, the glow of the screens and ringing of video game sound effects enveloping us in our little world. We were antsy, constantly checking phones and watches, counting down until our long-awaited revelation. You see, tonight was no ordinary night of gaming and guzzling energy drinks. No, the gods at Rockstar Games had finally granted us loyal fans a gift, the very first trailer for the mythical Grand Theft Auto 6. Speculation had run rampant across forums and subreddits for months, years even, as to what this legendary open-world title would bring. And at the stroke of midnight, we would get our first real glimpse. My heart thudded in my chest as the clock ticked ever closer. I couldn't believe this moment was finally here, the culmination of countless wishful conversations and fan theories. It felt almost too good to be true. That's when Jake had the bright idea that we needed more booze to properly baptize this monumental event. And guess who was the lucky winner nominated for the liquor store run? Yours truly. Bundling up against the howling icy winds, I ventured out into the night, the cold piercing through my many layers. I hurried to the fluorescent lights of the store, scrambling to gather drinks and snacks to replenish our stocks. The clerk eyed me strangely as I fumbled for my wallet, hands quivering more from excitement than cold. Bag laden with goodies, I emerged to find that the weather had taken an even more foreboding turn in my brief time inside. An impenetrable frozen fog had descended, limiting visibility to barely a few feet in front of my face. I felt almost blinded as I slowly picked my way back, cursing under my frosty breath about the situations my friends always seemed to get me into. By some miracle, I arrived back at my doorstep in one piece. I awkwardly juggled the bags, reaching into my pocket for my keys. My hand grasped nothing. The pocket was empty. A rising panic began to squeeze my chest as I desperately patted myself down, finding no keys or phone to be found. I must have dropped them in my hasty exit earlier. The chill creeping into my extremities was now far beyond physical. What cruel twist of fate was this? To be locked outside minutes before our exalted trailer premiere? I banged angrily on the door, calling out to my idiot friends. No response. I stomped to the basement windows, barely able to make out their forms staring intently at the screens. They couldn't hear me over their own ruckus in there. I was utterly stranded in the deathly silent night, the promised trailer time surely ticking by. A boiling frustration warred with bone-numbing despair. Would they even realize I was missing? I pictured myself as a human popsicle, frozen to the doorstep for eternity. At long last, the door swung open to reveal guffawing friends who simply cracked up at my misfortune. They just couldn't resist playing a little prank given my gullibility. Fuming, I stomped past them, violently cracking open a beer in retribution. How could they be so cruel? This was not just any night. We had waited years, fantasized for eons about this singular trailer premiere. And they had almost made me miss it for their moronic amusement. In a spur of perhaps questionable judgment, an idea rooted itself in my churning mind. As I distributed the fresh beers, I stealthily gave a hearty shake of salt across the tops when no one was looking. There, my vengeance would be complete with this harmless gag. Chuckling quietly to myself, I settled onto the couch just as the heavily teased trailer lit up the screens before us. Despite almost freezing to death minutes earlier, familiar goosebumps pricked my skin, watching the sights and sounds of the new GTA world unfold. The minutes ticked by in awed silence among us, until the first spluttering coughs and confused exclamations broke through. I glanced over to see my friends staring accusingly at their beers, perplexed expressions growing increasingly horrified. Then, one by one, they slowly keeled over, slumping to the floor unconscious. I sat frozen in shock and dawning horror, pulse thundering in my ears. What had I done? This wasn't supposed to happen. As I knelt over their lifeless bodies, the trailer's faint explosions and sirens sounded almost like mocking laughter. No one could have predicted such a night would end in an actual murder scene. No one except maybe a serial killer, or me. After an eternity, my friends jolted awake, frazzled but miraculously unharmed. It was just a little joke that went too far, they assured me. But their wide eyes and shaking hands suggested they now wondered what sinister thoughts lurked within my mind. To be honest, I wasn't entirely convinced of my innocence either. In the end, no authorities or ambulances were needed. We sat side by side for the remainder of the trailer, the mood definitively chilled. Every time I glanced sideways, I was met with wary, almost frightened stares. I knew then that nothing would ever be quite the same between us. The lingering doubts and dread had planted an unshakable seed within me. One simple, salty prank had warped into a nightmare scenario from my chaotic subconscious. I fear the darkness brewing inside has been unearthed, and now there is no turning back from the grim descent into my true madness. Who's to say what I'm really capable of? I'm 19, still living with my parents in our Texas home. We've got this cozy basement we've turned into our hangout spot, calling it the man cave. It's where we were, waiting eagerly for the GTA 6 trailer to drop. It was me and a couple of friends, just chilling, playing games, the usual. We had the whole night planned, snacks, drinks, celebratory blunts. My parents were out on their monthly date night and weren't due back until the wee hours. So me, Matt, and Sarah had free reign over the house while we geared up for the big reveal. The trailer was set to premiere at midnight. By 11 p.m., we were amped, glued to our screens, rapid-fire chatting about wished-for features and storyline possibilities. I kept glancing at the clock, willing it to tick faster. The basement had our preferred gaming setup, so it just made sense to view such a momentous event in our trusted man cave habitat. But as the minutes dragged on, the atmosphere seemed to shift. An odd chill permeated the room, despite the constantly running space heater. The normal hums and creaks of the old house felt louder and more unsettling. I shook it off as anticipation jitters, but a creeping unease was taking root. When Matt left to grab another round of drinks, an eerie scraping sound echoed from somewhere upstairs like furniture being dragged across the floor. Sarah and I exchanged puzzled looks. We were home alone, right? We waited for Matt to jump out, yelling, "Gotcha!" for orchestrating some stupid prank. But he returned empty-handed, confusion clouding his face at our questions. My laughter came out strained, an involuntary response to tamp down the fear threatening to rise. Just then, heavy thudding footsteps reverberated above us, too loud to ignore. We all froze, pulses quickening. This had to be Matt's doing, right? But one look at his tight-knit jaw proved it even he was unnerved. In unspoken agreement, we decided we had to investigate, a nervous excitement propelling us upstairs. I reach at the closed basement door first, heart lodged in my throat. With quivering fingers, I grasp the knob, only for it to halt halfway. It refused to budge another inch, no matter how hard I pushed and pulled. Dread crept down my spine. Something was preventing our exit, trapping us below. Panic flooded through me when the power abruptly cut, submerging us in oppressive darkness. This was no normal Texas blackout. The sudden silence amplified every ragged breath, every terrified whimper. I screamed for my friends, hands blindly grasping at nothing. Their replies echoed as if miles away. In my pocket, an iPhone lit up, casting a dim glow just long enough to illuminate their ashen faces before starting an ominous countdown to black. We huddled close in the last fading light, descending into hysterics about ghosts and demons and evil forces keeping us here. Time lost meaning in that lightless abyss. When my phone finally died, even the illusion of sight vanished entirely. It was just our disembodied whispers and racing heartbeats. Were we trapped in some nightmare? I pinched my skin hard enough to bruise, willing myself to wake up. But only numbness awaited. I clung to a fleeting hope. If I could just get to the fuse box, logic told me I could restore power and end this hellscape. But even with arms outstretched, I met only cold, unyielding walls on all sides. The enclosing darkness became a living, breathing predator, playing twisted games with our sanity. In the end, the only escape came when consciousness itself evaded me. I awoke slumped on the basement floor, weak light casting the room in dawn's gray glow. Groggy confusion clouded my mind until the events came flooding back. The trailer preview, the noises, my vanishing friends, none of it made sense. I bolted upstairs, not even feeling my legs beneath me, just pure desperation and denial pushing me forward. I needed to understand what sinister forces had invaded our sanctuary. But instead, I found only silence. Deafening, impeachable silence, telling me nothing had been real at all. Even now, when I meet Matt's avoiding gaze, my skin prickles with unease. He claims no knowledge of the horrors we endured that night. My dwindling sanity clings to the conviction that something beyond comprehension overtook us. But with no proof or explanation, the doubt has taken root inside, a creeping madness I cannot seem to escape. Horror, right? Yesterday had finally arrived, the day all of us gamers had eagerly waited for years. The official trailer premiere for Grand Theft Auto 6. I had cleared my schedule for weeks, stocking up on enough snacks and drinks to last a month. I was gearing up for an epic viewing party, even if it was just for an audience of one. Me in my living room. I had ordered a pizza from my regular spot to complete the ultimate trailer-watching spread. As the delivery time ticked closer, I realized nature was calling thanks to all the soda I'd gulped down. I ran to the bathroom just as the doorbell rang. Cursing under my frosty breath, I yelled for the guy to leave it on the porch as I frantically tried to wrap up my business. But when I opened the door, plate in hand ready to dig in, my cheerful greeting died in my throat. The delivery man was still standing there on the welcome mat, shifting awkwardly as he gave me an imploring look. "Hey dude, so sorry, but any chance I could use your restroom real quick? I know it's weird, but I've been slammed all day. Been holding it for hours." Every fiber of me screamed stranger danger, but the guy did seem genuinely uncomfortable, and it was just for a minute, right? Hesitantly, I nodded, directing him to the guest bath before retreating to the kitchen. I tried focusing on dishing up steaming slices, but my skin was prickling with tension. The sooner he finished up and left, the better. Just as I was about to call out impatiently, an unmistakable creak froze me in place. That was my bedroom floorboard groaning. Why would he be back there? I crept towards the sound, nerves jangling loudly in my ears. Peering into the dim room, my heart stuttered to a halt. The delivery creep was casually lounging across my bed, flipping through my gaming magazines stacked on the nightstand. It took him a moment to notice me, gaping in bewilderment. He bolted upright. "Oh hey, sorry. Started feeling dizzy and nauseous, so I figured I'd just lie down for a second. Hope you don't mind some company to watch that trailer later." He gave me a conspiratorial wink as he patted the empty bed space beside him. I stood paralyzed in confused terror before my survival instincts kicked in. I demanded he leave that instant, but he merely giggled. "Come on, don't be like that. We're going to be such good friends." He licked his lips as his gaze traveled over me, sending my panic levels through the roof. I turned and fled as a deranged cackle followed me. Slamming the kitchen door closed, I scrambled to lock it before grabbing my phone with a visibly shaking hand. As I dialed the emergency line, the banging and shouting started, the flimsy door threatening to give way any second. I could barely get the words out to the dispatcher, with the maniacal threats booming just feet away. The operator tried calming me, but I was hysterical, convinced I was living out a horror movie finale. At last came the blessed sounds of sirens and uniforms stomping toward my location. The psycho was still screaming about making me pay as the police hauled him away. My legs finally gave out with relief and delayed shock. I recounted my terrifying tale at the station between gulps of water for my parched throat. It turned out the maniac had assaulted the real delivery guy and stolen his uniform as part of some twisted scheme. As the gravity of my ordeal sank in, I shuddered, imagining what he would have done if I hadn't acted quickly. The authorities said I didn't even want to know what went on inside that deranged mind. But the question still nags at me late at night. What exactly did that sick creep have in store for me? Sometimes the shadows hold darker horrors than I care to guess.
Working at Walmart as a cashier since October last year. Christmas Eve rolls around and thank God I'm not scheduled to work. I was new. I didn't know what to do, so I went to ask my manager what we could do for him. The manager said there's nothing we can help with as long as the coupon is expired. 10 minutes before I was going to take my break, didn't want to bother and have an argument with the old guy. I just returned the coupon saying, "Thanks for coming to Walmart. Have a nice one." I saw his face, he was pissed, and he left the store nervous without saying a thing. Usually, I take my half break to eat something and the other half to smoke, but that day I was so tired, I needed to go out for a walk while smoking a cigarette. I went outside and saw the creepy old man standing next to my car. I was shocked. I asked him to move away from my car and he pushed me, shouting that I killed him and he won't forget my face and number plates. I shout back at him, "Leave me alone, man. Your coupon is expired, is not my fault." He walked away grumbling something inaudible. After that, I couldn't enjoy the rest of my break, so I returned to the store and rushed to finish earlier what I had to do. After 2 hours, I had done everything and jumped in my car heading home, but I saw that a car was following me, taking every street as I took. Couldn't go the same route because I live in a small village around, and I know every neighbor from there and didn't recognize the car behind. When I entered the street where my house is, I lost them. They were heading straight ahead and didn't turn right like I did. Grabbed my keys. Cannot say I slept well that night, asking if I would feel safe ever again. The next day I called my manager and asked him to check the footage of last night to see how that stranger got to my car and what he did next. I had a feeling he was the one who followed me last night on my way home, maybe wanted to know my address. The creepiest thing ever. My manager told me that there was no one to be seen on the footage, that I asked him to check just me in the parking line. I was frightened, shivers down my spine. How could it be possible? I wasn't drunk. I'm not crazy. He was real. The manager advised me to take some time off just to clear my mind and have some time to relax and get back to work in better shape. My name is Rosa. I have been working at Walmart since 2015. I know probably all the people who buy regularly from the store, by their faces. It is very rare to see new faces around. The store is in Portland, Oregon area, which is pretty isolated but still a big store and huge alleys to work on to keep everything tidy. I maintain the cleaning in the store, me and other 2 colleagues. We were pretty fun together and time passed fast while working together, but due to some family changes, I had to go for night shifts 1 month ago. Because at night the store is not that busy, I am the only one who is working at cleaning during it, but I don't feel that lonely thanks to the earphones. I can listen to my favorite music while I am doing my job and still have fun, even without my colleagues around. 2 weeks ago was very cold. 1 or 2 customers per hour entering the store, spending just a few minutes in. The atmosphere was really chill. The night shift begins at 9 p.m. and finishes at 4 in the morning. Around midnight, a guy walked in and waved at me. I asked him if I could help him with something. He asked me what department I was working for, and I told him that I do the cleaning job, but at night, because we are only 2 people in the store, I'm helping with everything needed. He smiles with an eerie sparkle in his eyes, mentioning that is from corporate, and he is doing some checks. Usually, we are informed when someone from corporate comes in to do their corporate stuff, but this time they probably wanted to skip this part. Luckily, the store was all cleaned, and the shelves looked nice and tidy. And I didn't bother too much that he was there to check what he needed to, but I let Emma know, the cashier from that night, about his presence, just in case. She told me she wanted to take a break just to have a smoke and she would come back in 5. I took a seat on the till chair and sat there for 10 minutes. She wasn't there to see, but I was relaxed because I almost finished my tasks. The guy from the corporate came to the till and asked me if I was alone now, and I said that my colleague was on break, but she will come back in a few minutes. He smiled at me and asked me to follow him to show me something that was not right in the store. I started to be suspicious as to what he wanted to show me. I said I couldn't leave the till until my colleague got back because someone had to be there for the customers. He looked around and saw there was no one in the store and just waved his hands like, "Let's go." "Okay, you are the boss," I exclaimed, and walked with him to the fitting area. He showed me a small area covered with some dust and asked me to clean it up. That was on the floor, near the corner. I had to bend down to clean it. He stood on my back and looked at me while I was cleaning it. It felt really awkward, like he was looking at my curves. After that weird moment, he asked me to help him choose a pair of shoes for the Christmas party, and I refused him, saying, "I am not good about shoes, just sneakers." But he insisted, and then asked me to tie the shoelace because he had a problem on his back and couldn't bend over. I was feeling abused by him just because it's from corporate, but he was polite all the time and I said, "Fine, I'll do it." While we were standing there, my colleague called my name saying she needed help with something. Felt like she heard my prayers. I ran to her and asked what happened. She said that she had spoken with the manager, who is her girlfriend, and told her that the guy who said is from corporate is not, and he could be a dangerous man. So we might have to be cautious and act accordingly. We immediately called the police, but due to the storm they late arriving, and we were so scared of being there alone with this person. This guy became suspicious and followed me through the alleys of the store while I faked doing my job as usual. Called my name a few times, pretending not to hear him, and then he grabbed my shoulder and told me to stop, otherwise he would hurt me. I was lucky that the police arrived at that very moment and arrested him, but the fear I felt then was unimaginable. I still work there, but I return to the day shift again, because I won't be able to handle my mental health if something like this ever happens to me again. I'm still very affected by what happened and still terrified. Working the night shift at the Clarksburg Walmart had always given me the creeps, but I never expected real horror lurking on those shadowy shelves. I first sensed something amiss on one of my first days as a toy department manager. I stayed late organizing the back room, fatigue weighing on my shoulders. As I slotted boxes onto a high shelf, the overhead lights suddenly cut out, plunging me into darkness. I froze, listening. A faint scratching sound emanated from the corners, too rhythmic to be routine store noises. It stopped as abruptly as it had started. The lights flickered back on. I shook off my nerves and hurried to finish. But the incidents accumulated. Products fell off shelves without cause. Stockroom doors slammed unexpectedly, nearly smashing my fingers. The plastic playsets vibrated violently when I passed by, their tiny occupants seeming to leer at me. My coworkers joked about ghosts, but the deepening dread in my gut said otherwise. The discovery of the mutilated mouse was the first tangible sign. Its broken body lay behind the board games, fur matted with blood, its insides hollowed out. No predator could have slipped into our steel-doored stockroom. Nausea rising in my throat, I reported it to the senior staff. They ignored my frantic concerns, telling me to toss it in the trash compactor. Then came the damaged Power Wheels box. Dark stains oozed down its sides, the cardboard sagging unnaturally. As I dragged it toward the compactor, it suddenly tripled in weight. I tasted something foul, rotten eggs and rancid meat. I opened the flaps with trembling hands. Violent maggots spilled out along with an overwhelming stench. Inside, clutched by melting plastic seats, was a twisted corpse the size of a small child. I stumbled backwards, gagging. Where eyes should have peered out were empty holes swarming with insects. Its melted mouth was open, filled with shattered teeth. My hands shook violently as I forced the box shut and fled the stockroom. Just then, all light vanished once more. I felt a rush of unnatural cold. Toys around me shook violently before levitating toward the black ceiling. A tortured, inhuman wail pierced my ears. Over the cacophony, I heard my name called in an eerily familiar tone. I turned and saw the face of our deceased store manager hovering in the dark. His sunken eyes bored into mine, flesh rotting off the yellowed bone. I ran and never looked back. But no matter where I hide, I still hear the shrieks of damned souls wandering the Clarksburg Walmart at night.
The moon cast an eerie glow through the dense canopy of ancient trees in the California woods. I was lost, disoriented, and terrified. You might know me as MrBeast from YouTube, but that night, I was just Jimmy, running for my life from a hitman who had been hired to end me. It all started with a cryptic email that had arrived in my inbox a week ago. It contained a simple, chilling message. Your days are numbered, MrBeast. No name, no return address, just those words. I had always known that fame came with its own set of challenges, but this was on a whole new level. As a content creator, I had amassed millions of subscribers who loved my videos, but there were always those who resented my success. I never thought it would lead to someone wanting me dead. I had sought the help of the police, but they were unable to track down the mysterious sender. The threats grew more sinister, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. That fateful evening, I decided to go for a drive, thinking that the open road might clear my head. But it only led me deeper into a nightmarish situation. The hitman, a shadowy figure dressed in black, had been following me. He forced my car off the road, and as I stumbled out, I knew that my life was hanging by a thread. I dashed into the woods, my heart pounding like a drum. The hitman pursued me relentlessly, his footsteps echoing through the eerily silent forest. The twisted trees seemed to lean in closer, casting long, sinister shadows that danced with the moonlight. The hitman was getting closer, and I could hear his heavy breathing behind me. Panic coursed through my veins, and I pushed myself to the limit, running through the dense undergrowth, the thorns and branches clawing at my skin. I could feel the presence of death inching closer with every step. But just when I thought I was about to meet my end, I stumbled upon a small clearing. In the middle of it, there was an old, decrepit cabin, like something out of a horror movie. Desperation took over, and I burst inside, bolting the door behind me. The cabin smelled of mildew and rot, but it was a temporary sanctuary. I crouched in a corner, my mind racing for a way out. The hitman hammered on the door, his voice a sinister hiss, promising me that there was no escape. I knew he was right. I was trapped with no way to defend myself. That's when I saw a glint of silver in the corner of the room. A dusty antique revolver lay on a dilapidated table. It was an unlikely savior, but I had no other options. My trembling hands reached for it, and I aimed it at the door, ready to fire if the hitman forced his way in. But the minutes dragged on, and the hitman didn't return. I didn't hear a sound from outside, only a deafening silence. I dared to peek through a cracked window and saw that the woods were empty. He had vanished. With caution, I left the cabin, determined to find my way back to civilization. The forest was no longer my enemy, and I navigated through the tangled underbrush, using the moon as my guide. Hours seemed like days as I walked in a daze, my mind racing with fear. Eventually, the woods began to thin, and I stumbled upon a road. My relief was palpable, but there was still a long journey ahead to reach the nearest town. That's when I saw the headlights of an approaching vehicle. I waved frantically, and as it slowed down, a sense of safety washed over me. The driver and his passengers, 3 burly men in worn clothing, welcomed me into their vehicle. They were a little rough around the edges, but offered me a ride to the nearest town in California. They didn't recognize me as MrBeast, and that was fine by me. I was just grateful for their help. As we drove through the darkened woods, they shared stories of the area, tales of mysterious happenings and lost souls. It felt like the perfect backdrop for a horror movie, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. But just when I began to relax, one of the men turned to me and said, "You know, we're not doing this out of the goodness of our hearts. There's a price for our help." The glint in his eye was unsettling. I didn't have to ask what he meant. In a tone dripping with menace, he continued, "We want $1 million, and we want it now." A chill ran down my spine. I was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by strangers who seemed to have ulterior motives. My fame and fortune had put me in this precarious position, and now I had no choice but to negotiate for my life in exchange for $1 million. It was a plot twist that turned my night from a horrifying ordeal to a twisted game of survival. As the miles rolled on, the tension in the car mounted, and the woods seemed to close in around us, casting long, sinister shadows. I couldn't help but wonder if the hitman was still out there, lurking in the darkness, ready to strike at any moment. The night was far from over, and the darkness held secrets I could hardly fathom. What I had just witnessed. I stood there, shaken but unharmed, the $1 million now a distant memory. The night had begun with the threat of a hitman, then spiraled into a nightmarish ordeal in the woods. But it had taken a sudden, supernatural twist that had saved my life. As I made my way back to civilization, I couldn't help but wonder about the wolf and its origin. Was it a guardian spirit? A manifestation of the woods itself? I would never know, but I was left with a profound sense of gratitude for the unexpected savior. The night had been a chilling journey from fame to terror, from desperation to salvation. The woods, once a realm of darkness and danger, had revealed a force far more powerful than I could ever have imagined. The encounter had transformed the night into a supernatural revelation, and I was left in awe of the mysteries that lay hidden in the heart of the California woods. As the headlights of a passing car illuminated my path, I couldn't help but reflect on the night's incredible twist. The woods had been a place of fear and malevolence, but they had also shown me the astonishing depths of the unknown, and the night had ended with a wow moment that transcended the boundaries of reality and sent me on a journey into the uncharted territories of the supernatural. I will never forget the night when the woods, full of red shadows and secrets, had taken me from the brink of death to a supernatural encounter that defied explanation. It was a night that would forever linger in my memory, a tale of horror and wonder that would haunt my thoughts for years to come.